right, everybody, welcome back to Trigger Happy Tactical Podcast, where the gear gets gritty and opinions, they don't come with safeties. So it's time to lock, load, and legion up. All right, today we're going to be diving into a head-to-head again. Kind of a real-world comparison between two high-performance compact carry pistols, the Sig P365 AXG Legion and a modified Sig P365XL Frankenstein kind of thing that we turned into a very serious ass kicker. On paper, they look damn near identical in weight, features, and pretty close on price. But on the range, that's where the story starts to unfold. In fact, this would have been a much shorter episode if not been for this one pesky, problematic thing that we'll go over in just a couple minutes. All right, but first, let's talk about our specs and our setup on these, what I would like to consider basically paper twins. You look at the specs and they're pretty much twinsies, right? Twin it to win it. All right, well, let's break down these specs. Oh, I'm in a mood, so good luck, everybody. So let's first talk about the AXG Legion. It has an MSRP of like $1,300. Can you find them a little cheaper? You might be able to, but to be honest with you, not much. They're a little bit harder to find because they're selling out pretty quick. They do come with 17-round mags, or if you live in some bitch state like Illinois, you're stuck with 10-round mags. And please don't remind me that I live in Illinois. It's painful every day. It does have X-Ray 3 day and night sights. It is optic ready right out the gate. Comes with a 3.1-inch barrel, and that's really due to the porting. It does have the AXG grip frame module. AXG stands for Alloy X Grip, which basically adds a bunch of weight to this gun and some strength and rigidity. It comes with G10 grip panels that are fully replaceable, so you can replace them with a whole ton of replaceable kind of like grip scales like you do on like 1911s and stuff like that, where you can add more texture, less texture, get some weird Gucci shit going on if you want some woolly mammoth tusk or wood. But you can also get brass ones to add more weight, or get a combination of both where they're adding weight and a whole lot more grip texture to it. But the factory grip texture is actually really, really good. It does come with a factory mag well that can be removed if you don't want it there, if it tends to bug you for concealed carry. And this gun comes factory with a 1913 rail. Sight radius on this gun is 5.1 inches, and that is shorter than other guns with this slide length, and that's because of what's in front of the front sight post. What's in front of that front sight post are these factory dual port compensators that are cut into the slide. So you've got these two big kind of chunk ports cut in front of that front sight post, so they had to push that front sight post back, which gives you a little bit shorter of a sight radius. Now, is that really a big deal? It can if you have slightly longer distance precision shots you're trying to get in. Sure, it could make a little difference. But when we're talking about guns that are set up for concealed carry that are, the one thing we always got to remember about self-defense incidents is they happen close and they happen fast, necessitating multiple shots. So that small difference in sight radius really isn't going to be that big of a deal. And this thing comes in at a factory weight of about 26 ounces. Now, let's go on to that modded 365XL that we built. The base 365XL will run you about $680 MSRP. X-Ray 3 day and night sights. It is optic ready, and it has a sight radius of 5.6 inches, and that's because it doesn't have those front ports from the factory to contend with. And factory weight on a 365XL, and mind you, it's a polymer gun, is around 20.7 ounces. Then we removed that crazy polymer grip, and we added an Icarus Precision Ace 365X macro grip frame module to it. We went with the larger grip frame module because we wanted a nice factory look when we added on the next thing we'll talk about. But the Icarus Precision Ace Grip runs you about $400 MSRP. It's also an alloy, which gives you some added weight. It increases the size, the dimensions, adds a nice little flare to the magwell area, and it has a super aggressive grip texture. You leave some DNA behind when you're holding onto this thing, which is my style for sure. And it does add a full pick tinny rail to the front. You do, however, need to get new mags, because if you're building this out of a standard 365XL, those mags aren't going to work with this. So think about how much money you're going to have to invest in on new magazines, or if somebody makes a magazine extension that works with it. But this thing does pack on another 5.22 ounces. Then the next thing that we added on was that Radian Ramjet and Afterburner. This thing is sweet. I really do like the Radian Ramjet and Afterburner. They did a really, really good job on this thing. It is clean, but it will set you back about $400 MSRP on it. And they're, just like the Icarus grip, kind of harder to get a hold of because they're not making as many as people want, right? And this kit adds a new barrel, and then that new barrel on the end does have a large single port compensator. This thing is a big chunk up on the front. It's a hell of a a port or a compensator on the front of it. And they claim that it reduces 44% recoil. 44% reduction in recoil. I don't personally see it, but I mean, as we know, claims are always inflated on things. Does it feel like a lot? It does. Does it feel like 44%? Yeah, I don't know. But that combination of that larger Icarus grip frame module with the factory XL slide, and then this Ramjet Afterburner combo, the port, or the end of the barrel and the port, lines up perfectly with the edge of the grip. So it gives this kind of a factory kind of look. If you've ever looked at the Sig, what is that, Spectre Comp? If you look at the design of the Sig Spectre Comp, it kind of looks very much like a Sig Spectre Comp. And then the last thing that we added to it was a Tyrant CNC IntelliFire trigger shoe, which is a pretty cool trigger shoe. I'm gonna be honest with you. It's only $95 MSRP, and they claim a 30% reduction in trigger pre-travel, and it gives it a 90-degree break. But important to note that most 365s, XLs, and especially the AXG, they also break at 90 degrees. And the Tyrant CNC IntelliFire trigger shoe also adds that trigger safety dingleberry, dongly, I don't know, whatever the hell you want to call those things, but that little center shoe in the middle that's kind of its version of a safety, which is kind of cool if you want to add another mechanism of safety to it. But our total build on our modified 365 is going to run you about a tick over $1,500 MSRP. Now, again, that's MSRP. Can you find some of these parts for cheaper than the $1,575? You can. So wait for sales or whatever, and you can get that price down considerably. But also do note that now the approximate weight of this gun is about 26.5 ounces, give or take. So now we've got two guns that are compensated, two guns that are alloy grip frame modules that are larger than the traditional variant, have a hell of a lot more texture to them, and weigh the same amount. Both of these guns have nearly the same weight, identical recoil management setups, meaning it uses like a port or compensator. They're nearly identical in size and dimensions, and they have the same basic core features. So then let's move on to where it matters. How do these things actually shoot? Let's talk about range results, and let's first talk about the type of tests. This is going to kind of separate hype from hardware. I ran through both a single hit precision drill and a timed build drill. For my single hit or my single shot precision drills, all I did was I bench rested it, and I ran 10 shots with all the time in the world, smooth manipulation of the trigger. I really tried to squeeze out kind of the best precision out of these small guns on a smaller target. Then I picked it up and handheld them to see, can I squeeze out similar results in precision being held by the hand? And I did. These two guns were dead even in a single hit precision drill. So that's cool, right? We get single hit precision where they are dead nuts neck and neck. So far, everything's pretty even on these two guns. But then came the bill drill. If you're unfamiliar with a bill drill, it's 6 shots into an alpha circle area on a target, right? Like an IDPA or IPSC USPSA type cardboard target. And we do that at 7 yards, and we shoot as fast as we can, but also maintaining enough accuracy to not have a single round go outside that alpha zone. This drill, for me, with guns, really kind of helps show how the gun can be controlled or how it can handle, and particularly handling itself under recoil, right? Under that speed and that recoil. As every shot comes out of that gun with speed, recoil builds, it compounds. It's going to want to continue to rise on you. But we have two kind of heavier compact guns that also have ports to compensate that recoil. But here's how they stacked up. And each of these guns I ran 4 times. And then based off those 4 times, I gave it an average. And boy. So let's start with the AXG Legion. First hit was 1.89 seconds. Second hit was 2.09 seconds. Third hit was 1.90. And then the last hit was 1.93 seconds, giving it an average of 1.95 seconds. So then how did we do it the modded 365? Well, first run, 1.92. Second, 1.99. Then 1.88 and 1.92, which gave it an average of 1.93 seconds. You're talking about 0.02 of a second difference. That's nearly identical. In fact, I'm really going to chalk that up to the human aspect portion of it, because that could be the slightest difference in the way on one of those shots I either pulled the trigger back or released the trigger, or it's returned to center. So I'm going to chalk up the difference in those times purely to human aspect of this, right? So both guns, they handled beautifully. That weight and that porting very, very clearly tamed recoil. The way that they snapped back and the way that you saw your dot almost instantaneously was pretty crazy for such small firearms. And shooting them was fast, it was smooth, it was satisfying, and I didn't feel like I had to really throw a lot of muscle into it. I really let the port compensation and the weight of the gun and the weight of my arms really just drag it back down again for those shots. It was something to feel from guns that are, well, meant to be compact concealed carry type guns. But the numbers aren't the whole story on this one. See, I noticed during the build drill that the AXG had much wider shot groups, basically filling that entire alpha circle on target. Every time I would shoot, bang, 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 I was making my shots. They were all in that alpha, but they used up like the entire alpha area, the entire A box on that target. And no matter what I did to try to rein that in, I was not able to tighten those groups up. Whereas that modded P365 had much tighter and much more consistent groups, which really struck me as odd. And I had to know why. It to me, it didn't make sense. If both these guns have the same weight, they have the same dimensions, the same type of recoil reduction methods via porting, and they both felt so controlled with good gripping, like good grip texture, where they didn't feel like they were jumping around or getting out of control, then what the actual fuck was going on here? What was happening? So I had to sit down with the AXG and I figured it out. I figured out the reason why the AXG had wider groups, but I'm not going to tell you that just yet. I'm going to let you hang on to that for a few minutes. I want to dig a little bit deeper into a couple other things before I circle back and hit that up, okay? So just hang on to it. We found the solution, or I guess more or less found the problem. So before we jump into that, the next thing I want to talk about is comfort and concealment, kind of concealed carry concerns over this, right? Because that's what these two guns are designed for. These aren't competition rigs or competition firearms. These are guns meant to be concealable, right? And concealed carry is the bread and butter of both of these guns. So being that these guns, again, have the same specs, they carry equally as good as each other. They really were really nice carrying guns. Sure, they're a bit heavier than your standard polymer guns. Yeah, that weight is what makes them so damn nice when you shoot, and you shoot them fast. And personally, I'll make that little bit of a sacrifice of weight, right? It doesn't bother me. That's what having a good concealed carry type belt, like a core belt or something like that, which is what I never leave home without, is a core belt. That is not a shameless plug. Core doesn't give us any money for any of this. I just really like the product. But I'll make the sacrifice of weight if I have a good belt that will hold that weight tight to my body, because you notice it a whole lot less. But the aggressive grip texture on the Icarus grip frame that I loved so much, that was so grippy and was so amazing while shooting, was the same grip texture that started to wear down and actually started to rub through my base layer undershirt. I always wear a base layer. I always have a undershirt on, usually like a tank top undershirt that creates a buffer between my holster or my gun and my skin. Maybe got bitch skin. I don't know what to tell you. But not only was it starting to actually wear through my undershirt, it was actually starting to leave some major irritation on my skin. So for holster selection, you're going to want to make sure that there is holster between your grip and your body for sure. Which may make that holster a little bit bulkier. Well, but it also brings us to our next little oddity, and that's holster selection with these things. The Icarus frames in general will not work with holster designed for the original version of that firearm, which means they have to be specifically designed for that particular Icarus grip. And they make a few Icarus grips that work with SIGs, like quite a few Icarus grips that work with the SIGs, which then only gives you a few select holster options. But there does seem to be more that they're adding on all the time. But to me, it's still a limiting factor. It's forcing me to have to go with this 5, 6, 7 different holster manufacturers. And none of those were actually the holster manufacturers that I normally run or that I normally like or that I'm comfortable with. So it forces me into a particular holster. And I'm not a big fan of that, but you can go on Icarus's website and it actually lists all those manufacturers that make grips, or that make holsters for that grip, to make it a little bit easier for you. And yes, there are some really good holster manufacturers on that list. And the AXG, it's not immune to the oddity of holsters. See, what most people don't know is there are 2 generations of the AXG grip module. The original Gen 1, which is kind of different than all the other SIG guns, and it needs a very specific holster for Gen 1 AXGs. And yes, there are a lot of really great holster manufacturers that manufacture them for the first gen AXGs. Usually I run G-Code or I run Dara. Those are my 2 staples. I just really like both their holsters, and they're pretty kick-ass companies. So they already make it for the Gen 1 AXGs. And a bunch of the other big names already make it. So there's a plethora of holster options out there for it. But the Gen 2 won't work with the Gen 1 holsters. The Gen 2s, though, will work with any SIG macro holsters, if I'm not mistaken. I think it's the macro, not the fuse. Yeah, it works with the SIG macro holsters. So you can now buy any SIG macro holster if you have the newer version of it, and it'll work with any of the SIG macro holsters. And there are a lot of those that are out there. So that opens up your options significantly. And I'm going to be honest with you, that was a really smart move on SIG's part. SIG has a lot of guns. They have a lot of models of guns, and holsters don't work across all those different models. They have to be built for each one of those models. So to have them make it so it fits an existing, very popular firearm was extremely smart on your part, SIG. Congratulations, hat off. But in short on this topic, the AXG was way more comfortable to carry with and gave me much more options on holsters. So when it came to the comfort of carry, I prefer the AXG just because of my options and the fact that it didn't feel like it was a cheese grater on my stomach because I was carrying appendix, right? All right, next, let's jump in and talk about our grouping gremlins, right? Let's jump back and address the issue that I kind of just left you hanging on. And that was on purpose because I wanted you to hear a few more things before I jumped into that. But let's talk about the grouping issue of the AXG. Upon further inspection, right, upon going, all right, what's my problem here? I noticed that the AXG rattled a lot when you shake it. And I don't mean just a little bit of rattle like you get with most guns. I mean, this is a lot of rattle. It was loud and there was a lot of movement. So as I located the source of the noise, I found that the slide shifted around a whole lot, like in every direction, like up, down, left, right, angulars and torsion and torquing it. It wasn't tight to the frame. The slide had a tremendous amount of movement, and I've never seen a gun have this kind of movement to it. And then on a deeper dive, I noticed that the FCU, or that fire control unit, that thing that you can take in and out and put it into different frames, had a whole ton of free play inside the AXG frame. So you can literally grab the FCU inside the frame and then hold onto the frame, and you can move that FCU around a lot. And I mean a lot, in every single direction. So to test out these findings, I took my FCU out of the AXG and I stuck it in a factory Sig XL frame I had. Then I stuck it in a Sig Macro frame, a Wilson Combat frame, an Icarus frame, and then I pulled an brand new AXG Legion off the shelf and dropped it in that, all with the exact same results. The fit was nice. In fact, it was perfect. It was extremely tight. There was no moving. There was no rattling. There was nothing. It went in. It went in kind of snug, and it held that FCU tight with zero movement and zero rattling. Well, that's a big fucking problem, considering this is a brand new $1,300 gun. This is my brand new $1,300 gun. So I called my Sig rep, and within minutes, he had an RMA tag ready for me to send my firearm back to Sig. Hats off to you, dude. My Sig rep he's a badass. I do got to give him that. But that's a big issue for me. See, this gun is my primary concealed carry firearm that I carry every single day. This gun gets put on me from the minute I wake up until basically the minute I go to bed. In fact, I had traded in my existing modded 365 XL. So we've got a big problem. I cannot be without my gun for what I would be told could be, I don't know, is up to 6 to 8 weeks. No, thank you. Since I isolated the issue to that frame being the thing that's out of spec, Sig did agree to send me a brand new frame when they received the old unit frame that had the issue. Good thing is I have other frames lying around, right? I can always throw my FCU into another frame, so I technically won't be out of a concealed carry gun in any way. So that direction worked a lot better for me, and it wasn't going to be 6 to 8 weeks without any firearm. I was able to carry a really weirdly Frankensteined gun at that point. So thanks, Sig, for that. I do appreciate that. Your customer service, as always, is pretty baller. And now, before this scares the hell out of you out of getting the AXG, I've got a bunch of other AXG guns. They're all amazing fit and finish. I've handled a ton of these 365 AXGs, from customers' guns to competitive shooter of mine, like my competition guys, their guns. And I've got to say, that's the first one that I ever knew to have an issue. Of course, it's mine, right? But that's the way the cookie crumbles. And to be honest with you, I'd rather have it happen to me than a student or a customer. So we'll get it figured out. But what actually made me originally jump on board with the 365 AXG Legion isn't because like it's a cool gun, because it is. It's a cool gun. I'm going to be honest with you. Color is cool. It's just a neat little pistol. But I actually fell in love with it when I was in New Hampshire at the Sig Academy. I was at the Sig Academy for a few days, and one or two of those days we got to pick kind of like a pistol. And one of the pistols that I picked and used for a whole lot of shooting in those few days was a 365 AXG Legion. And what actually made me fall in love with it was I picked it up. We ran a couple of plate rack drills and did a couple cool competition type of runs and stuff like that. Did a mag change, refilled everything back up, shot it some more, and I got about I don't know, probably halfway through a full day, when I set the gun down to reload the mags, I set it down and I actually looked at the gun and I went, holy shit. I'm shooting a small little compact gun. Now, I carry a 365XL and it doesn't shoot anything like this. But the fact that I put the gun down and thought I was shooting a full frame, full size gun was pretty stupendous. And so that's what caused me to fall in love with the 365 AXG Legion. It was how it shot. And yes, it had really, really good tight groups. So I wound up just getting an anomaly, I guess you'd say. So let's wrap it up. What's the final verdict on this? Who actually wins this war? Well, these guns are like two prize fighters who go the full 12 rounds and then still leave the judges scratching their heads. Who won? And what would probably happen is a solid disagreement, to be honest with you. At the same size, the same weight, and the same amazing recoil compensation, great handling, and near same basic price, how the hell do I actually pick a winner? It's tough. The AXG is a really beautiful firearm. Feels amazing in the hand. It shoots fast and flat. Mag changes are fast. The weight feels really, really nice. Whereas the modded P365 is equally masterful. It shoots flat, fast, looks nice, and that grippy texture is freaking awesome. But while the Radian Afterburner and Ramjet tamed the recoil beast, it also created a much larger fireball out the top port. You know, straight up in your line of sight, which could be slightly problematic in low light conditions, such as in something going bump in the middle of the night, and I have to defend myself with that firearm, because I'm going to tell you, shooting that thing in low light or in the dark was a bit disorienting and blinding right in your sight picture where it counts, right? But again, we're talking about being nitpicky on these sorts of things. So then which gun is actually the winner? Oh boy. To be honest with you, issues aside, I prefer the AXG. I like the performance out the gate, the fact that it's just a factory gun, giving me the ability to then modify it more down the line if I want to, meaning I can still add a trigger and make the trigger even better. I can change those grip panels for more weight or more aggressive grip texture, or a combination of both, and add a heavier magwell to it. I also like options on holster selections. I'm an options kind of dude, and having more options is good. I don't like something forcing me to buy a specific product. I don't want to be limited to what type of holster I can get for my firearm, because that honestly fucking sucks. I'm an options kind of dude. And trust me, this AXG isn't going to be a stock gun for very long. They make these really cool brass, so much heavier brass, aggressive textured Legion grips for it, and a brass magwell to throw a little bit more weight in it. I'm going to probably throw a nicer trigger in it. So I'm going to do some things to it. But that being said, if you already have a P365, you can take advantage of that modularity FCU. That's why they made the FCU the FCU. That is the serialized part. So you don't have to buy a new gun. You can simply build your gun and build the one out of the one you already have and make that a complete badass of a gun. And then down the road, you're kind of saving yourself some pennies, I guess you'd say, because you already have the gun. Or simply trade the gun you got in on an AXG. Either way, you've got options, and you will come out of this with a really, really damn good gun. So who wins? You do. That's really what it comes down to on this one. Whether you buy an AXG or build up your P365, you are going to end up with a badass concealed carry gun. My pick, the AXG, but I can't say that would be the right choice for everybody. All right, everybody. Well, thanks for tuning in to Trigger Happy Tactical Podcast today. If you've been eyeing the P365 platform and are wondering which route to go, now you have, data. Whether you're Team Legion or Team DIY, you can't lose. And remember, it's not about carrying every day. It's about carrying smart. So stay sharp, shoot straight, and as always, it's time to lock, load, and lie to the wife about buying a new gun. crap. Until next time, I'll see you guys later.